So this year we see a lot of farmers, this time of year, see a lot of farmers looking at plot data and evaluating how different treatments did throughout their operation and throughout other operations as well, different areas they go to, plots they see in meetings and in print as you go forward. And one of the questions we get asked a lot is so how come this product or this process worked for me but it didn't work for them? Or how did they get such a big response in their plot and I didn't see anything in mine? Some of it may have to do with plot layout and a lot of underlying conditions. Another aspect, I guess, that we see is because of all the technology that we have out there today, we're using yield monitors and GIS software to extract data that we could never do before. It makes it easier for us to put in plots, but we want to make sure that we don't rely on the data that we have available too much or put too much credit in some of this stuff that needs to be analyzed a little bit further. And definitely with all of our plots that we put out in our farmers, we emphasize the importance of being able to actually weigh those plots, make sure that we get a true weight on them, not just taking yields from the yield monitor per se. Now, we've come a long way in calibrating yield monitors and the technology behind yield monitors, and they're a lot more accurate than we've ever dreamed of 5 or 10 years ago. But there are still differences that make it very hard to collect pinpoint accurate data with yield monitors in a plot or research type scenario. So we've got an extensive variety plot looking at the flex of different hybrids, trying them at high and low populations to see how do these ears flex. And one of the things we notice is the shape, the size, the weight of the kernels can change drastically in some hybrids when we start changing population or different management practices. And here, for example, variety A, we have our high and our low population. Size of the kernel, weight of the kernel does not change much at all. So we have around 70,000 kernels to make a bushel. It doesn't matter on the population. But when we get over here with variety C, D, and E, there become big changes in kernel size, kernel weight in some instances to create that bushel. And when we start changing the shape of a kernel, the size of the kernel, the density of it, it's going to flow differently. It's going to hit some of these pressure plates that we're using to measure yield differently in these yield monitors. And all of a sudden, our extremely accurate or well-calibrated combine introduces a little bit of error. All right, at different segments, I guess, in the plot as we go through. And if we're comparing different hybrids, here we're looking at test weight. Same thing, from high to low population, we get a test weight change. And in some characteristics, the test weight actually went up as we went to a lower population. In some cases, the test weight went down. All right. But we start changing, like variety D here, 2.5 pounds of test weight in a single plot entry. Within a couple rounds, our monitor is not going to accurately measure those differences. It may underestimate the difference. It may overestimate the difference. All right, but that's something we have to be aware of, and why in all of our plots we're backing up those yield monitors with actual scale weights to figure out how close they are and adjust them if need be. All right. Here we're looking at, this time, all the same hybrid but different treatments. All right, we've added nitrogen treatments in this plot here and in different populations, and how that can change the yield reading in the monitor itself. So we had a well-calibrated yield monitor. It was actually within 1.5% error across the whole plot. But that's good, but that's 1.5% error. So sometimes it was closer than that. Sometimes it was up to 3-4%, which can add up to be quite a bit. If I'm 3% over on this one and 2% underestimating the next hybrid, that can create quite a difference when we're looking at the economics and really trying to sharpen our pencil as we go forward. So here's kind of a comparison here. We have treatments A through C. Treatment A, we're right on. In treatment B, the yield monitor underestimated actual yield by 6 bushel. All right, again, only 3%. In treatment C, it overestimated yield by 8 bushel. So we either created a 15 bushel gap that wasn't there, or we potentially eliminated a 15 bushel gap that was there if we were just to use yield monitor data for this plot. Yield monitor data makes data extraction by soil type or zones within the field possible, which is great, which is what we need to focus on, and we'll actually talk about next week. But we still have to back that up, kind of a trust but verify, to make sure that as we change the practices in the field, are we changing conditions enough that yield monitor is starting to introduce error into those readings. And if we're doing fungicide applications, we're doing nitrogen studies, out there in the field, we're changing the shape. We can change the test weight of that kernel. We may have a 3% error in this block right here. We may have a 2% error here. We may have a less than 1% error in this strip right here. We may make sure that we're weighing passes off of each of those strips individually so we can actually adjust the error for each of those strips to accurately evaluate those plot results. All right. And this is especially true as we start to get to VRT planning, multi-hybrid planning. Now we're starting to look on a zone-by-zone basis. How does these things perform? How are they going to pay us back? We have all this technology in the tractor. We want to use it. We want to design plots that lay out these blocks for us. We don't have to flag them. We don't have to do the strip trials. And plots like this do well to prove the concept and the technology. It shows us that we can variable rate plant, we can variable hybrid plant if we want to out there. But it doesn't provide a very stable environment to be able to analyze the actual yield results. When we strip hybrids in there and we block them out like in this area right in here, what happens if this hybrid in here is the one that the monitor is underestimating by 6 bushel? And this hybrid over here is the one that it's overestimating by 6 bushel. We have no way to know that it's even underestimating by 6 bushel because even if we took a weight by pass, we have all these different hybrids mixed in across here. All right, but the fact that matters is that yield monitor is going to read this hybrid slightly different than it's going to read that one. So we definitely push our guys to get strips out there all the way in the field, get them all the way across or in a position where they can actually take those strips and the treatment's the same across the whole strip and they can weigh it to verify those differences. We've seen enough differences over the years that if we go solely off yield monitor data, you can get tricky. We can see hybrids do better than the other and it not be there just by test weight, just by kernel shape size, even with a well-calibrated yield. So something to think about as you start to lay out your plot designs for the upcoming year.